Hello everyone, this video today will be covering the SnowPiercer timeline that I've been able to construct so far. It goes without saying that there will be copious amounts of spoilers, so please consider this your warning. Before I get into this, I am yet to be able to fit the TV show into this universe as I do not know its place yet. I'm waiting for the TV show to conclude or shed more light on this matter. The material that is included into this universe is the following: SnowPiercer the prequel Extinction, SnowPiercer the Escape, SnowPiercer the Explorers, SnowPiercer the Film, SnowPiercer the Crossing, and finally SnowPiercer the Terminus. It is quite hard to get exact dates as it's quite vague, but the books do give somewhat of a reasonable effort to show how much time has passed, and from this I'm able to work out the years and months with some margin of error. I have also found this image that is said to be the official timeline of events for the SnowPiercer universe. However, there seems to be a problem with this. They have set the events of the first book after the 7 years mark. Now, from the events in the comics, this cannot be, and I'll go into further detail when covering it. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. SnowPiercer Extinction. So this book is set between 3 to 5 months before the events of the CW7 launch, or is more commonly known as the Extinction event or the Big Freeze. This book showcases a bit of the state of the world before the freeze event and some of the powers that be that contribute to the freeze. From reading the book start to finish, there is no mention of the CW7 chemical or any ideas of calling the planet. The book starts in Africa with some poachers who are killed by a group called Wraith, who is like a vigilante group who dedicate themselves to keeping the earth from being destroyed, even if it means killing other people. It then skips to a building which is the World's Petroleum and Gas Corporation building, and this building is set ablaze by the same group for what they have done to the world. The next scene is then that of an assassination of a higher up in what seems to be the WGPGC, and then skips again a few weeks, giving light on the rising sea levels, the mass immigration and overpopulation that is plaguing the world. Now, this is when we are introduced to a man called Mr. Zeng. He then goes on to state about his previous invention, which is the perpetual motion engine, and that he has designed it to be able to be used in a larger vehicle such as trains. He then goes on to mention that the world seems to be coming to a tipping point of no return, and announces building of said train to survive the pending apocalypse. After some more weeks pass, we are shown the faction's main base, which is Wraith's main base, in the Amazon rainforest, and that they have some sort of plan to speed up the extinction of mankind. In the meantime, the train is built and begins test runs on the tracks to try and iron out some of its teething problems. We are then introduced to a man by the name of Forrester. We will meet this man again later in the comics. More time passes, about a month, towards the end of the book, when Wraith act Phase A of their plan, which is to hack into all of the world's nuclear power plants and then cause them to melt down. In the book, some images depict the nuclear explosion from these sites, and they look like nuclear bombs going off. Now, personally, with this point, the only problem is that they depict them actually physically blowing up, like that of nuclear weaponry. From my understanding, such things can't happen with nuclear power plants, as they can explode like how Chernobyl did, and then proceed to melt down, but they don't quite explode as depicted. Right before the end of the book, they start Phase 2, and we can see that they are, well, it's going to involve some kind of weather balloon, and as of yet we don't know what the plan is or what's contained on these balloons, but it might be something to do with the CW7 chemical. So that concludes the end of the first book. We've been told that 2 more books are going to be following, which is Apocalypse in September and then Annihilation to follow on after that. Hopefully that sheds a hell of a lot more light onto the situation. So next in line we have the Big Freeze event. So we're told in the film that this event starts on July the 1st, 2014, when CW7 is released into the atmosphere. Now, from all the material I have read and been able to read, I can't tell if that is the day the world comes to an end, or it's when it starts coming to an end. I don't know if the process takes days, a week, or anything like that, but I would reckon it would only take a few days, from what's depicted anyway. So we'll just be sticking with July 2014. So after that, next in the order of events is the first book. I've placed this to be around the late side of 2017 to mid-2018. The reason for this placement will become clear when I get to the events of the film. So The Escape is the first book to be written in the series and was made in 1982, originally called Le Transpersonnage, probably butchered that, and then later renamed to SnowPiercer. Events-wise, I think that everyone's pretty much aware of what sort of goes on, but I'll give a very brief overview. The story follows Proloff and a girl called Adeline from his escape from the tail section all the way up to the front of the train. I can't say much happens in the way of events to note, but what is worth mentioning is that first he had to break out the tail section to the outside and then come back through the window, a feat that was thought impossible. Next is that we introduce the jug canola, which becomes a main point in the film as an explosive. We also learn that while back there was an old man, and on his birthday he wishes to be alone for 1 hour. The passengers in the hotel section make that happen, and then when they return they find that he's hung himself. This is the same, obviously, event with Old Man Ivan in the SnowPiercer TV show at the beginning. Obviously due to events, but events very similar. I don't think it's the same train, just simply because of where it's placed on the timeline, being 2021 instead of 2017 to 2018, and you'll understand again in the film to why I've placed this. So towards the end of the book we learn that Proloff is carrying some sort of disease that has been killing everyone off on the train. The tail section is detached as the train has been slowing down. The last few pages of the book, Proloff shoots the windows out of the carriage before the engine, cutting off access to the engine. Adeline is killed by the cold, but the driver drags Proloff into the engine. We learn that his name is Alec Forrester, the same name as the man we meet in the first SnowPiercer train built in the book Extinction. So it's safe to say that at this point the train is the same train. Things might change though. We learn that Alec is then dying and needs someone to inhabit the engine, which is called Olga, as she needs to feel lived in as part of the smooth running of the perpetual engine. The last page shows that everyone is dead and Proloff is all alone. He bangs on the floor, but is startled as he hears that there's knocking sounds coming back. Next is the very start of the second book. We learn that SnowPiercer is able to brake and slow down. This train is named SnowPiercer 2, or, as most people know it, it's called the Icebreaker. I must add that out of all the SnowPiercers that I've seen and understood the layout of, this one is majorly different from the rest, mostly due to its sheer size. In this story it shows there is something called the first braking event. I placed this event around the same time as the first of the end of the first SnowPiercer book, so it'll be around the 2017-2018 mark. Now, you won't know until reading towards the end of the second book, but the first break-in event was actually an event, and I quote from the book, that the icebreaker hit the SnowPiercer. We then know that this event lasted a few hours, and almost all the explorers who went outside died, par one. This man was key, and he had to stay in the engine to occupy it, as per the requirements of the engine. The reason for this is that the icebreaker took the SnowPiercer on board. The knock that Proloff heard could be that of the explorers from the icebreaker trying to contact him, or the feeling of the icebreaker hitting the back of the train. After this, after the first break-in test, the book then skips 15 years later. Next on the timeline will be the 2013 film SnowPiercer. Now, although from watching the film it only seems like a few days have passed, but we're shown at the beginning that 17 years have passed and the year is 2031. If this is the year, then I can say that it's taken several months for the Taylors to settle the uprising. But if it only really took a few days, as the film kind of shows, the date is wrong at the beginning of the film and the year is actually 2032. As most people who are watching this has probably already seen the film, I won't be explaining the plot, but I will be explaining my points and how I've got to them. Now, there is a crucial point in the film, and that point in the film is the only reason I can place the years and narrow down to months, is just from this one scene, and that is the fight on Yaketerina Bridge. Without it, it would be very hard to place these dates. Now, this is said by Minister Mason. Now, she states that the Taylors would be frozen 18 years ago today if it wasn't for Wilfred. So we know that they are not celebrating New Year's as in how we celebrate New Year's, but for theirs it is 18 years from the day of the Extinction event. So this places this scene in July 2032. After this scene, that there's only one more day passed until the end of the film. We see Yona and Tim leave the train and they see the polar bear. We know that these two survived this ordeal due to the events later on in the book Terminus. Next would be the events, well, the rest of the events in the second book, The Explorers. This happens around the same time frame as the SnowPiercer film. At this point, the passengers still don't know that the icebreaker has already met up with the SnowPiercer and have taken aboard the train. Now, I must add that the higher ups have been using the perpetual fear of the icebreaker hitting SnowPiercer and ending all motion. Now, where are we? The book follows. Now, I think is how you pronounce it. It's Pudge. It's spelled Puig. Who is an explorer who ventures outside of the train on these break-in exercises. On one such event, he turns his camera off and then someone dies in an accident. When he gets back to the train, he is then taken up the train for turning the camera off. At some point, he tries to escape as he realises they are just going to kill him. Pudge is captured and then sent on a suicide mission. Now, the icebreaker is equipped with radar, but the radar doesn't reach the bridge that they will be having, well, that they'll have to be passing over. They mention that they send pilots on these sort of excursions to see what the radar can't. Once Pudge arrives at the point where the mission starts, he realises that the suicide mission is to fly a plane from the icebreaker to the bridge to see if the bridge is out. The reason it's a suicide mission is very common for pilots to not return and crash the plane. So after many years of this, there's only one plane left for the recon mission. Anyway, Pudge flies and checks the bridge and shouts to the train to brake as the bridge is down. They say thank you and then cut Pudge off communication. Pudge starts to fly back and realises they have turned around and are leaving him behind. He saw that there is an engine on the back of Icebreaker as well. This is another unique part of Icebreaker. As well as another unique design is that the Icebreaker has a turret on top of it. As Pudge starts to get closer, the turret opens fires on him, and then he starts threatening that he's going to ram the front of the plane into the train if they don't let him land. A girl called Val, who he falls in love with and later has a child with, televises this event, and the people call him a hero for saving the train, and he is allowed to return. Not much really happens after this, and the story of the explorers come to a close. Next is the story of the crossing, SnowPiercer, the crossing. The crossing is set a few months after the end of Explorers. The premise of the book is that they learn that there's a radio signal being transmitted from across the ocean. The higher-ups don't tell Pudge to begin with, and then later tell him. After a bombing leaves the Icebreaker devastated and losing over half of its carriages in an uprising, they tell Pudge about the signal, and there is no other option, and they decide to move forward. This is then when we learn that the train is equipped with caterpillars, and the caterpillars only cover the engine and then 25 carriages behind it. The crossing takes just over 40 days to get across the ocean to the source of the signal. In the meantime, Pudge takes the plane out again, as some of the crest of the waves were quite big and it's hard to transfer, so they needed the radar couldn't see over them. So the plane had to recon it. They also come across an old aircraft carrier, and it's still functional due to the nuclear engine that it has, and it starts launching missiles at the SnowPiercer, severely crippling it. The carriages behind it anyway, so they lose a lot more people and carriages. Once that 40 days had passed, they find where the signal is originating from. They get to where the explorers head out and head to where the signal is, and they find that inside it's empty and there is nobody there. Now, this is where the book Terminus picks up pretty much straight after what happens. They find out that they're actually on top of a skyscraper, so Pudge and a few others find their way to the energy source. While doing so, at the bottom they found that they're in a train station. They manage to get the icebreaker inside, but it's damaged and will no longer work due to the collapsing tunnel. Because of this, he is left in the drawers until his trial for what he has done. In the meantime, the group goes off to explore. While doing this, they run into some masked mice people who take them away into quarantine. They're in quarantine for 50 days, and it turns out they are living under a nuclear power plant. In an amusement park, everyone has to work to be part of the community, and this is where we learn as well that there are 10 total SnowPiercers, of which Icebreaker was the 7th and the last one to make it to the amusement park. The 3 others have not been seen. I guess that one of them is the SnowPiercer, which is the one in the first book, which is aboard the Icebreaker. And then we also have the derailed train, SnowPiercer, that we see in the film. After that, there's only one other train that is unaccounted for. Now, in the meantime, from when they first left, after 29 days since he was put into the drawers, Pudge manages to escape, and over what's probably a few weeks regained some of his strength. He is very malnourished. At this point, the former radarist has been told that he's been given a promotion, and he's been given a new living quarters and to go there immediately. This is where he sees a young boy and he runs over to him, and this is where the radarist also runs into Pudge, as well as the boy. Pudge takes the radarist with him to meet a girl. The girl says along the lines that her and the boy was on SnowPiercer about a year ago, when it derailed, and that they're the only survivors, and they were attacked by a polar bear. We also learn that the radarist has a terminal illness, and that is why his new promotion has been given to him, which is to shovel snow onto the fuel rods in the nuclear power plant to keep them cool. And the rain from the ceiling is actually the melted snow and is highly radioactive. During the quarantine, they have been taken blood samples from the people, and they were to see if they had any terminal illnesses. Anybody that found they had a terminal illness was sent to work on the power plant as well. They haven't really got majorly long, and it doesn't really matter then. Anyway, we find that the people who are looking after the place, it's a couple, and they've lived for quite a long time. What they've been doing is they've been taking stem cells from babies and been using them to regenerate their limbs and so on and so forth. Val is pregnant, and that's why, to begin with, she didn't want to take the blood test, but she took the blood test. Well, she was ratted out as being pregnant, and she is taken by this couple. Pudge then learns of this, and then he breaks her out, killing the couple in the process. In the meantime, there was a engineer who had been taking parts from different trains and all that, put them into one to make another working SnowPiercer. While Pudge is escaping, he manages to rally everyone. Also, he's being chased by the masked men. Now, these masked men, from living underneath the nuclear power plant, were heavily deformed, and they cannot bear children, but they still want to live. Pudge gives them a ultimatum of they can either stay here in this amusement, they might live, but also be killed by what's keeping them alive, or they can face uncertainty on the SnowPiercer and escape their life. And then this is where SnowPiercer pretty much ends. There is a scene later on in the book which happens around 50 years into the future, and from the last page in the book we see that there's a little bit of snow that has melted away and there's flowers growing up from the ground. So, I hope this video has helped people who haven't read the books or haven't seen a lot of the material that's out there to understand the timeline and placing of the SnowPiercer timeline. If there is anywhere or anything that you disagree with, feel free to post something and let me know and explain why and how, because there's probably something I'm overlooking or not seeing. So that would be I would be very grateful for that. Thank you very much, and I hope you've enjoyed the video.